morning, boys and girls. Today, we're going to go back to Hidden Talent, and I'm going to discuss with you the character. Yesterday, we talked about the setting. We talked about the physical setting, and we talked about the psychological setting, and how that might set us up for understanding the plot. Well, the setting also can give us a sense of who the character is. And so my question for you today is, what character traits would you use to describe Martin, the main character? His name was said once, so if you didn't pick up on it, his name is Martin. Martin Anderson, actually. And what would he look like? I know they have a picture of him on the front, but sometimes the person who draws the picture on the front, the cover art, has not read the whole story. They might have read a part of it. So it's up to us in our heads to make the picture, and so it'd be really cool maybe to even draw what you think he looks like today. So I'm going to finish up chapter 2, and I'll be moving into chapter 3. I stared at the charred pieces of paper scattered around the desk and the bits of extinguisher foam dripping slowly onto the rug. What a mess. It looked like a giant cow had let loose with one monster of a sneeze. And you're here because you have a hard time with math, right? Huh? Poor Torchy seemed a bit puzzled. Just kidding. I could see this was going to be a lot of fun. I reached down toward my bag, but I didn't want to unpack yet. That would make it real. So you feel like showing me around? Principal Davis didn't exactly give me a detailed introduction to the place. Yeah, sure. Torchy led me into the hall and started giving me the tour of Edgeview Alternative School. And there's some pieces here. Memo pad on Principal Davies' desk. Things to do: check insurance situation, make sure extinguisher is refilled, keep an eye on the new student, prepare for weekly staff meeting. So he's got a normal to-do list. And then from Dale Briggs' notebook, how about a unit on using science facts in everyday life? I think the kids would like that. Everyday occurrences like a dormitory fire or a small explosion present a wonderful opportunity for a lesson. What else? Maybe I could do something with food. That's always popular. So they've got like the teacher thoughts in here too. Taking the tour. Lip and Bloodbath live in that room, Torchy told me, pointing to a door near the stairs. Lip's no problem by himself. Heck, he's almost a midget. But Bloodbath likes to beat on people. He's in our grade, but he's almost 16. Keep out of his way. Thanks. This was useful information. It was nice knowing where the toilets were and stuff like that, but I was a lot more interested in learning who could hurt me. Why do they call him Bloodbath? That's his last name. You're kidding. Nope, Torchy said. His voice dropped to a whisper. He's Lester Bloodbath. Anyone call him Lester? I asked. Nobody who's still alive. Torchy shrugged, then led me around the rest of the hall, telling me who was in most of the rooms. There were a lot of nicknames, none of which I'd be proud to own. One kid was called Goober Gobbler, for reasons I wouldn't want to think about on an empty stomach. And there was the unfortunate Patrick Pardue, who had to go through every day of his life being greeted with his initials. Hi, PP. That's Waylon, Torchy whispered, pointing to a small kid who was walking down the hall away from us. But we call him Hindenburg. Why? I asked. Torchy grinned. You know what the Hindenburg was? An airship, like a blimp, except it's rigid, I said, remembering a picture I'd seen. It's a bag full of gas. Yep, Torchy said, and so is Waylon. That little guy? Torchy nodded. He's deadly. Don't ever get in a small space near him, especially when they serve cabbage or beans at lunch. He stuck out his tongue and made a farting sound. Call me weak, I laughed. I also felt relieved. With Hindenburg labeled as the school gas man, there's no way I'd get stuck with a nickname like Fartin' Martin. Not that I had any problem in that area, but the easy rhyme made that sort of thing a danger. So, as I think about Martin, I'm noticing that he's observant, and I'm also noticing that he's a little bit defiant, and I'm curious to see why the author is giving me those traits. Observant because he's talking about, knowing where the bathrooms are, but also paying attention to the details about the kids. He sized up the principal right away and figured out how to get under his skin. And when he's been asked questions by adults, he totally just lets fly with kind of a comment that implies, hey, don't treat me like I'm a kid. And then I loved his description of the bus driver and his pal at the gate, the dogs sniffing each other. So those would be the 2 character traits that I'm thinking about right now. I'd be curious to see what ones you came up with. If you can't remember really interesting character traits, you can always Google a list of character traits, and that might help trigger getting a more specific trait other than like happy, angry. You want to push yourself with character traits. Let's see. Torchy introduced me to several kids, but my brain was already getting overloaded with names and faces, so none of it really stuck right away. I guess most of them didn't remember my name either, not that I'd expect them to. All in all, it was kind of a relief actually meeting some of the students. I'd figured I was getting dumped on an island filled with nothing but axe murderers and cannibals. So far, I hadn't seen either, just 7th and 8th and 9th graders. What are the classes like? I asked as we headed down the dorm room to the 2nd floor. Depends, Torchy said. Some of the teachers are big time strict. I think 1 or 2 of them should be locked up somewhere themselves. Miss Nomad is nice. She's the English teacher. Once we get her talking, she'll chatter for the whole period. So we really don't have much work to do. Just say Shakespeare and she's good for an hour. Mr. Briggs, the science teacher, is pretty cool. He's the one who came in with the fire extinguisher. I didn't care about the teachers right now. I wanted to find out more about discipline, since I seemed to get a major dose of it wherever I went. So, are you in trouble for that fire? Torchy nodded. I noticed that some of his hair was singed at the tips. Yep, I'm in trouble, he said. What'll they do to you? He shook his head. That's the scary part. You never know what they'll think of. They keep trying different stuff on us. It's like we're some kind of rats in a lab. Honest, they try something different every time. Does it work? As I asked him that, I realized it was a stupid question. If the punishment had worked, Torchy wouldn't have been barbecuing papers in his room. He spread his arms out in a gesture of total innocence. How can it work? I didn't do nothing. They keep trying to cure me, but I didn't start the fire. The lighter was empty, just like these. He reached into his right pocket and pulled out a handful of disposable lighters. He flicked one a couple of times, throwing a shower of sparks. See? No flames. I just like the sparks. Oh boy. I could tell there was no point trying to get Torchy to face reality. I'd known kids like that before. You could stand there and watch them do something, hit another kid, break a window, steal from a store, and then, if you accused them, they'd look right at you and say, I didn't do it. I'd known all kinds of liars. Some enjoyed it, some couldn't help it, and a few poor losers didn't even know they were lying. But that was his problem. I wanted more details about what might happen to me. I imagined dozens of kids locked in dungeons, dangling from chains, while a huge, sweaty guy wearing a leather apron heated up torture tools. The image made me shudder and laugh at the same time. I could just picture what would happen if they went near Hindenburg with a red-hot poker. Kaboom! Lots of little Hinden bits flying through the air. What sort of stuff do they try for punishment, I asked. They ever hit you? Torchy shook his head. No, not too much. They might take away privileges, or make you watch some stupid old video on how to behave, or force you to listen to a lecture. You'll find out. Guess I will. Come on, show me the rest of the place. I followed Torchy down to the 2nd floor. He pointed to one room at the end of the hall. Teachers take turns staying there, overnight and on weekends. I don't know why they bother having someone else around, since Principal Davis almost never goes home. Past that side of the stairs is more dorm rooms. The rest of the floor is classrooms. He opened a couple of the doors so I could see for myself. The classrooms were pretty much the same as any other classrooms I'd ever been in. Poorly erased blackboards and uneven rows of chairs, and desks left no mistakes what went on during the week. Most of the stuff didn't match. I noticed at least 3 different kinds of desks in the first room and lots of different chairs. I guess even the furniture was stuff nobody wanted. Edgeview seemed to be a final rest stop on the way to the scrapyard. One classroom didn't have any desks or chairs. All I saw was a rug spread out on the floor. "That's Mr. Briggs' room," Torchy said as we looked in. "He brought the rug himself. He keeps experimenting with different learning environments. It's a good place to catch a nap." I was about to turn around when I got this feeling someone was staring at the back of my neck. Then I turned around and found that the feeling was a fact. For an instant, I thought I was about to meet a teacher. That's how big the guy behind me was. When reality sunk in, I checked the hall for a quick escape route. "I'm Bloodbath," the guy said, stepping close enough to cut off any hope I had of sprinting away. He looked about half the size of the bus driver, which was still a lot bigger than any kid had a right to be. No fat, all the weight was muscle. The way Torchy had talked about him, I expected him to be some kind of a troll. But he could have passed for one of those actors who makes a couple of movies, gets real popular with the girls for a year or 2, and then vanishes from sight. He had that kind of face. He wasn't alone. There was another kid with him. He barely came up to my shoulder. I was pretty sure, based on Torchy's description, that the other kid was Lip. Lip was so ugly, I had a hard time taking my eyes from his face. It was like staring at a traffic accident. Bloodbath glanced over at Torchy, then tilted his head slightly. He didn't say a word, but Torchy got the message. He swallowed, blinked a couple of times, like a puzzled turtle, and took off. He started out walking, but broke into a jog as soon as he got a few steps away. I had the impression he couldn't wait to leave. What a pal. Yep, we roommates sure stick together. Bloodbath turned his attention back to me. "Welcome to Edgeview," he said, putting a large hand on the door frame next to my shoulder. A small silver ring dangled from his left nostril. I had this crazy urge to reach out and yank the ring off, but I knew if I did, it would be my last act on planet Earth. I waited, figuring that just like Principal Davies, Bloodbath had plenty more to talk about. "Ding dong," Bloodbath said. "You hear that? That's the school bell." As he said "school bell," he gave me a shove, pushing me into the empty classroom. "And guess what?" he added, as the 2 of them followed me in and closed the door. "It's time for your first lesson." Note recently added to Lester Bloodbath's permanent file. Lester is obviously troubled, but he does seem to display some wonderful leadership qualities. It's quite apparent that others admire him. They definitely take notice when he enters a room. We must encourage him to develop these qualities. And then that's that. And then apparently carved on his desk: "Bloodbath rules, kill, hate is great," spelled Grate. Oops. And something. "Let's break something." And that's Lester's desk. Boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that story. I think you've got a lot of characters to think about and nicknames to ponder, and I'm sure we'll get to know all these characters better soon. I would love to see your pictures of Martin if you get a chance. Bye.